Hey everybody, and welcome to the 5 Bytes podcast. I'm your host, Rory Monahan. Coming up on this week's episode, some of the announcements will be covered from Microsoft Build that was held during the week, including the new CoPilot PCs that were announced. Also, some of the announcements from Nutanix's .next conference that was also held this week. And a state's cybersecurity agency is recommending that people and organizations stop using SSLVPN and WebVPN. For this and more, keep listening to this episode of the podcast, which of course, as always, is brought to you by my sponsors. And that includes ControlUp, end-to-end digital experience management for the work from anywhere era. ControlUp, happy users, happy IT. And also brought to you by Numescent, the inventors of the first and only cloud-native container management platform for Windows desktops. And also brought to you by Netrix Policy Pack, where you use Group Policy, Policy Pack Cloud or MDM, to remove local admin rights, manage lockdown applications, Java, browsers, and mitigate ransomware, plus more. If you enjoy the show each week, you have these awesome sponsors to thank. And now for some news. Microsoft Build was held this week. And during the event, or even actually, I think it was before the event or just before the event, they announced some new hardware and AI capabilities in the product called CoPilot PCs, which are Microsoft's vision of AI-first flagship Windows hardware. They all include dedicated chips called NPUs, which I've talked about more on the infrastructure side of things in the past. And those, of course, are neural processing units that are essential for powering AI. And they'll be used to power AI experiences like the recently announced Recall, which I'll talk about in just a moment. And they'll ship with 16 gigs of memory as a minimum, and it will be paired with SSD storage on the devices. TechCrunch.com reports the first CoPilot PCs will pack Qualcomm's Snapdragon X Elite and Plus chips, which Microsoft claims delivers up to 15 hours of web browsing and 20 hours of video per battery life. So that's pretty good. Chip makers Intel and AMD are also committed to building processors for CoPilot Plus devices in partnership with a range of manufacturers, including Acer, Asus, Dell, HP, Lenovo, and Samsung. And I saw some tech outlets had some videos up on social media showing off some of these devices. So certainly some of the devices already exist and they're being demoed. And it's reported that CoPilot PCs will be starting around $999. So it's actually pretty reasonable, I think. And some are available already for pre-order, but it seems like they're not available to get your hands on right now, although they were being demoed. As part of the announcement, a new Surface Laptop and Surface Pro, which are obviously Microsoft's native-owned hardware products, were also announced. And these will reportedly include the Surface Laptop that's available with a 13.8-inch or a 15-inch display and has been designed with modern lines and thinner screen bezels. And this lasts up to 22 hours on a charge and is up to 86% faster than the Surface Laptop 5. It also supports Wi-Fi 7 and has a haptic feedback touchpad. The Surface Pro is up to 90% faster than the previous generation Surface Pro, which was the Surface Pro 9, and it sports a new OLED with HDR display, Wi-Fi 7 and 5G optional, and an upgraded ultra-wide front-facing camera. It also has a detachable keyboard, which has been reinforced with additional carbon fiber, and now also has haptic feedback too. And during Build, Microsoft also announced a new AI-powered feature for Windows 11 called Recall that I just mentioned, which records everything that you do on your PC and lets you search through your historical activities. With Recall, you can scroll through your own timeline to find content from any app, website, or document that you'd opened. The feature utilizes snapshots to suggest actions based on what is recognized, making it easy to return to specific emails in Outlook or into the right chat within Teams. To use Recall on Windows, you'll need a CoPilot Plus PC that supports the appropriate NPU, a Snapdragon X chip, 16 gigs of memory, and 256 gigs of storage. Microsoft says the feature will roll out with support for only some languages, which will be English, Chinese Simplified, French, German, Japanese, and Spanish. You can control what information Recall can capture, and Microsoft says the AI works at the hardware level and keeps all data stored locally on your device. So this is not something that's going to be taken and stored up in the cloud that could be possibly breached using some sort of cloud provider or cloud storage. However, while that sounds okay from a security perspective, it being kept local, Kevin Beaumont suggested on Twitter, if you look at Microsoft's own FAQ about Recall, it states, quote, note that Recall does not perform content moderation. It will not hide information such as passwords or financial account numbers, end quote. So that is concerning. It's just taking all data regardless of what it is, and it doesn't seem to be doing anything to obscure some of that sensitive data in that recall history. Also announced was image editing and live translations that will also be exclusive to the new CoPilot Plus PCs. And some of that was really impressive as well on display in some of these demo videos that I saw as well. So definitely check out some of the video content from the announcements. But Tom's Hardware waxed lyrical on the subject of these Copilot Plus PCs this week as well, and the fact that features may be exclusive to specific hardware models. And he pointed out that people who bought laptops just this year that were maybe promoted as like AI ready PCs may be unable to use these features, pointing out that the CPU and NPU requirements exceed the currently available laptops on the market. So those people just spend a bunch of money on hardware that could essentially be rendered obsolete if they want to use these AI features. So I don't want to go too long on the Microsoft Build announcements, so I'll just cover a few more if that's okay. But Microsoft is also adding a new advanced paste feature to PowerToys for Windows 11 that was announced during Build, and this can convert your clipboard content on the fly with the power of AI. The new feature can help people speed up their workflows by doing things like copying code in one language and pasting it into another, although its best tricks require OpenAI API credits. Advanced Paste is included in PowerToys version 0.81, and once enabled can be activated with a special key command, Windows key plus Shift plus V. That opens an Advanced Paste text window that offers paste conversion options including plain text, Markdown, and JSON. During the keynote for Build, they shared that they are up to 1.8 million GitHub Copilot subscribers, which is pretty impressive. They'll also be bringing version control capabilities natively to Windows Explorer. Sudo for Windows was once again discussed, as was app isolation, but those are things that have been previously announced, and I've actually covered on previous episodes of the podcast as well. So not new information, but rather a reiteration of those features. Edge is reportedly going to be able to translate and dub over videos that are being played within the browser. I also saw a really cool demo video of using Paint with some of the AI features, and someone was basically doing a very crude drawing of a landscape. And while they were doing that crude drawing, up in the top right-hand corner of Paint, there was a slider where you could make it look more realistic by toggling maybe to the side. So you could just draw like a landscape with like flowers and big clouds or whatever, and then in the top right-hand corner you can get a like almost photorealistic version of it using AI, which I thought was pretty cool too. During the event, there were also reports of WinUI 3 and other new frameworks that are in the works from Microsoft, along with some new SDKs that developers might be willing to sink their teeth into. And as usual, Microsoft has published a handy book of news covering the announcements from the event. Just at a glance, if I was to compare it to previous years, if you look at like the content, there's not very much that was covered in terms of products. They were very, very specific, it seems, this year, which maybe is not surprising. So many eggs in the basket of AI, so a lot of it's focused on that. I did see that PowerToys got some love. But as I commented a few weeks ago, when the agenda and the session catalog was revealed for Build, it was a shame to see that products like Winget or Windows Package Manager and MSIX that have been featured previously in Build did not have any content announcements or sessions, it seems. So, I mean, it's been a concern from many in the community that with this AI revolution, that the actual like nuts and bolts and meat and potatoes of what IT admins require may be going a little bit ignored, which is a shame. Hopefully, some of those key components to enterprise IT management and operations also get some love soon. Nutanix held their .next event this week in Barcelona, and during the event, a collaboration with Dell was announced. Nutanix Cloud Platform for Dell PowerFlex will reportedly combine benefits of the Nutanix Cloud Platform powered by AHV Hypervisor for compute, along with Dell PowerFlex for storage. Dell will also offer an integrated turnkey hyper-converged compliance combining Nutanix Cloud Platform and Dell servers. So I saw some in the community reporting that this is kind of a little bit of a flex from Nutanix, moving slightly away from just VMs and more into like the hardware game, which I guess maybe, yeah, that's one way to interpret it. Nutanix and NVIDIA also announced a collaboration aimed at helping enterprises more easily adopt generative AI by integrating NVIDIA's enterprise AI microservices within Nutanix GPT in a Box version 2. The two companies will provide customers with a scalable, secure, high-performance AI inference experience across the enterprise and at the edge. Nutanix also announced new functionality under the development for the Nutanix GPT in a Box solution, including integrations with NVIDIA NIM inference microservices and Hugging Face large language models library. Nutanix announced the Nutanix Kubernetes platform to simplify management of container-based modern applications using Kubernetes. The NKP enables customers to innovate faster with a complete CNCF-compliant cloud-native stack that gives platform engineering teams a consistent operating model for securely managing Kubernetes clusters across on-premises, hybrid, and multi-cloud environments. This can help customers deploy more cloud-native and containerized applications that can ultimately run anywhere. They also announced several enhancements for the AHV hypervisor itself, such as a secure snapshot capability to strengthen the platform's cyber resilience, with a new multi-party approval control for privileged operations such as snapshot changes to protect against malicious actors and ransomware. And they also announced a new automatic cluster selection feature during the event. I saw several mentions of strengthened partnerships with Cisco and Citrix as well throughout the event, which is something I talked about on previous episodes of the podcast when those were announced, or in the case of Citrix, kind of re-announced because there was a strong partnership in the past. And then after Citrix's acquisition, it seems like there was an announcement of a strengthened partnership again. And Citrix announced at Nutanix.next that now in tech preview, they have a Citrix plugin for Nutanix AHV. And they say with this plugin, customers can experience multi-cluster for large-scale deployments on hybrid clouds, streamlined operations using a provided template, as well as a batch and event-driven operation for better performance. And also coming soon, Citrix will offer a tech preview for Citrix Virtual Apps and desktop support via Nutanix AHV Prism Central. And anyone interested can sign up for that now. Also available in tech preview is the NetScaler VPX for Nutanix. And they say that this includes a new VPX appliance built for a Nutanix AHV and directly is supported by Citrix to enable a secure platform for modern and traditional applications with a high quality experience. Customers can also take advantage of Citrix support for Nutanix GPT in a Box, which includes zero trust access, IP control, no data left on endpoints, and all with no required endpoint upgrades. This is kind of a long episode already because this is what happens when there's multiple conferences in a week. So I'll just try to wrap up with this because I did find it interesting that both the Citrix blog post featuring the Citrix related announcements that were made during .next and an interview with Nutanix's CEO that was featured in India Times this week seems to have used the event as an opportunity to go after VMware and Broadcom. So years ago, there was this tit for tat between VMware and Nutanix, and frankly, as someone who didn't work for either company and wasn't aligned with either company, I found it exhausting, and in my opinion, at times it became embarrassing. But it seems like with the Broadcom acquisition and perhaps some VMware customers feeling the heat and the itch to perhaps move away, they're taking this opportunity. And the CEO of Nutanix said, quote, "The Broadcom acquisition is creating a major storm of uncertainty and risk that you all have to deal with. I have spoken to you over the last year, many of you, about the challenges and the risks here of navigating a new vendor reality. What I can tell you is that we are here to help you navigate this storm." End quote. So interesting. It seems like all the arrows are being fired towards Broadcom, and there's maybe a weakness sensed because of such outrage from their customers. So it'll be interesting to see how this develops going forward. And to follow up on a story that I covered on last week's episode of the podcast, the Windows update that was creating an install error for some when installing KB 5037765 on Windows Server 2019 has been confirmed as an issue that's specific to Windows Server machines using a non-English language pack, and also reportedly some editions of Windows 10, including an LTSC edition. Microsoft has yet to provide an official workaround for these install problems and is still working on a fix. Installing the ENUS language pack on affected systems will likely allow the buggy patch to be installed. A Microsoft advisory suggests that some customers have also reported the install errors on Windows 10 version 1809. Home users of Windows are unlikely to experience the issue since the Home and Pro editions of this Windows version reached end of servicing in 2020. So only the Enterprise and IoT LTSC editions that are under extended support may be inclined to encounter this problem, and they have reiterated that they are working on a solution. Following up on another story that I covered on last week's episode, I went through some of Google's AI-related announcements made at their I/O event. One feature was an AI-generated overview in Google search results, which would provide an overview of the search results generated by AI. Google's AI integration has several quality issues, however, including causing a slight delay as it generates an answer, and even more problematic, according to bleepingcomputer.com, it sometimes displays incorrect information. Some users have been complaining about the feature on social media and Reddit, with one user stating, quote, "Every single result I've received from the AI overviews has been incorrect. I'm more than capable of misinterpreting internet articles on my own, and I can probably get at least slightly closer to actually understanding than the AI because I actually have cognitive processes." End quote. And when the AI gets things wrong, sometimes it gets things very wrong. Apparently, it advised drinking 2 quarts of urine when asked about how to pass kidney stones quickly. While initially released as an opt-in Search Labs experiment, Google recently began rolling out AI Overview to everyone in the US, whether they wanted it or not, with other countries coming soon, and there's no opt-out option available. If you are annoyed with it, bleepingcomputer.com does have a workaround to bypass the overview. It's not necessarily an option to uncheck or anything like that, but there are some steps you could take. A recent report by Rapid7 says that a search engine campaign displayed ads for fake PuTTY and WinSCP sites when searching for download WinSCP or download PuTTY. Now, of course, this is not the first time this has happened to these kind of publicly available utilities. These ads used something called typo squatting domain names like PuTTY.org, WNSCP.net, and VVINSCP.net. And whilst these sites impersonated legitimate sites for WinSCP, the threat actors imitated the unaffiliated site for PuTTY.org, which many people believe is the real site. The official site for PuTTY is actually www.chiark.greenend.org.uk, and it's under another subdirectory for the actual download. So people might be easily tricked to thinking that, yeah, of course it's at putty.org, when really it's not. These sites include download links that, when clicked, will either redirect you to legitimate sites or download a zip archive from the threat actor servers based on whether you were referred by a search engine or another site in a campaign. The downloaded zip archives contain a setup.exe executable, which is renamed to a legitimate executable like Python for Windows, like Python w.exe, and a malicious Python 311.dll file. When the Python w.exe executable is launched, it will attempt to launch a legitimate Python 311.dll file. However, the threat actors replace this DLL with their malicious version, instead using that DLL sideloaded. When a user runs the setup.exe thinking it's installing PuTTY or Winamp, it loads the malicious DLL, which extracts and executes an encrypted Python script. The script ultimately installs the Sliver post-exploitation toolkit, which is a popular tool used for initial access to corporate networks. Rapid7 says the threat actor used Sliver to remotely drop further payloads, including Cobalt Strikes beacons. The hacker used this access to exfiltrate data and attempt to deploy a ransomware encryptor in organizations. This is just another case of bogus ads displayed in Google search results that are nefarious, so you really have to look out. And I've covered it as a tip in the past, but you could check out the Evergreen PowerShell module that has legitimate links to the latest version of multiple different popular applications used in the enterprise and also outside the enterprise. An Arizona woman has been accused of helping generate millions of dollars for North Korea's ballistic missile program by helping some of the citizens of the country land IT jobs at US-based Fortune 500 companies. Christina Marie Chapman, who's 49 of Litchfield Park in Arizona, raised $6.8 million in the scheme. Chapman allegedly funneled the money to North Korea's munitions industry department, which is involved in key aspects of North Korea's weapons program, including its development of ballistic missiles. Part of the alleged scheme involved Chapman and co-conspirators compromising the identities of more than 60 people living in the US and using their personal information to get North Koreans' IT jobs across more than 300 US companies. Chapman allegedly operated a laptop farm at one of her residences to give employers the impression the North Korean IT staffers were working from within the US. The laptops were issued by their employers, and by using proxies and VPNs, the overseas workers appeared to be connecting from a US-based IP address. Chapman also received employees' paychecks at her home. Federal prosecutors said that Chapman and 3 North Korean IT workers, using aliases of Jiho Han, Jeonji Jin, Haran Zhu, and others, had been working since at least 2020 to plan a remote work scheme. In March of that year, prosecutors said an individual messaged Chapman on LinkedIn and invited her to be the US face of their company. From August to November of 2022, the North Korean IT workers allegedly amassed guides and other information online designed to coach North Koreans on how to write effective cover letters and resumes and falsify US permanent residence cards. The indictment came alongside a criminal complaint charging a Ukrainian man with carrying out a similar multi-year scheme. Chapman was arrested last Wednesday, and it wasn't immediately known when she or Oleksandr Didenko, who was the Ukrainian man, were scheduled to make their first appearances in court. If convicted, Chapman faces 97.5 years in prison, and Didenko faces up to 67.5 years. Pretty crazy story. The Norwegian National Cybersecurity Center is recommending those to replace SSLVPN or WebVPN solutions with alternatives due to repeated exploitation of related vulnerabilities in edge network devices to breach corporate networks. Numerous countries have recommended IPsec over other protocols, including the US and the UK. If you are using SSLVPN and WebVPN, you may want to pay attention and adhere to this advice. Last week, I somehow missed that Citrix unveiled the new UI for Citrix Storefront, which, to be honest, it was a case of deja vu when I saw it, as I could swear that this was actually unveiled a couple of years ago. The branding is aligned closer with Citrix Workspace's UI, and it is a nice improvement, I think. Although there was nothing wrong with the old Storefront UI, sometimes it's good to give something like a new lick of paint and an overhaul just to show that it is being actively developed and loved. And if you want to see that for yourself, you can check out the YouTube edition of this episode, which is episode 335, and you'll find that at 5bytespodcast.com, and I'll share a link with this episode as I do for everything I cover on every episode of the podcast, and you'll also find that with this episode, and you can check out that link to see it for yourself. In a tweet this week, OpenAI appeared to respond to comparisons that people were making with the movie Her, starring Scarlett Johansson, with its upcoming voice options in the recently announced ChatGPT 4.0, which is the Omni release I covered on last week's episode. In the tweet, they said, "We've heard questions about how we chose the voices in ChatGPT, especially Sky. We are working to pause the use of Sky while we address them." In a blog post published alongside the message, the AI company said, quote, "We believe that AI voices should not deliberately mimic a celebrity's distinctive voice. Sky's voice is not an imitation of Scarlett Johansson, but belongs to a different professional actress using her own natural speaking voice. To protect their privacy, we cannot share the names of our voice talents." Now, the post added, "Each of the voices ChatGPT uses have been carefully selected through an extensive process spanning 5 months involving professional voice actors, talent agencies, casting directors, and industry advisors." After OpenAI had announced this pause and released their statement, a statement was released by the actress Scarlett Johansson, which is funny because I'm guessing they probably rushed to announce they were putting a pause on it and distanced themselves because perhaps they knew that this statement was coming from Scarlett Johansson. And she stated, quote, "Last September, I received an offer from Sam Altman, who wanted to hire me to voice the current ChatGPT 4 system. He told me that he felt that by my voicing the system, I could bridge the gap between tech companies and creatives and help consumers to feel comfortable with the seismic shift concerning humans and AI. He said he felt that my voice would be comforting to people. After much consideration and for personal reasons, I declined the offer. 9 months later, my friends, family, and the general public all noted how much the newest system named Sky sounded like me. When I heard the release demo, I was shocked, angered, and in disbelief that Mr. Altman would pursue a voice that sounded so eerily similar to mine that my closest friends and news outlets could not tell the difference. Mr. Altman even insinuated that the similarity was intentional, tweeting a single word, her, a reference to the film in which I voiced a chat system, Samantha, who forms an intimate relationship with a human. 2 days before the ChatGPT 4 demo was released, Mr. Altman contacted my agent asking me to reconsider. Before we could connect, the system was out there. As a result of their actions, I was forced to hire legal counsel who wrote 2 letters to Mr. Altman and OpenAI, setting out what they had done and asking them to detail the exact process by which they created the Sky voice. Consequently, OpenAI reluctantly agreed to take down the Sky voice. In a time when we are all grappling with deepfakes and the protection of our own likeness, our own work, our own identities, I believe these are questions that deserve absolute clarity. I look forward to resolution in the form of transparency and the passage of appropriate legislation to help ensure the individual rights are protected." End quote. So I wanted to do the service of reading that entire statement. It was quite long, but I found it pretty interesting because it does suggest that perhaps OpenAI and Altman knew that Scarlett Johansson was going to release this statement because the issue had already been raised with them. And indeed, she's correct. There was a tweet that just had the word her. So they wanted people to do a comparison of her and the new service. It'd be really interesting to see how this goes as a lawsuit. I can remember the actor Crispin Glover, who was in the original Back to the Future film. He was deemed to be like too difficult, I believe. He complained about the ending where Marty got a new pickup truck and like it was product placement even early on, like back when that movie was being made. They did that very obvious product placement for a new pickup truck that was going to be released by Ford after the movie was released. So, he took issue with that and he was raising his concerns about that. And he thought the story should have been more about, the families back together and everything's great rather than there be this like commercial prize at the end in this pickup truck. And because of the difficulty that he was giving to the producers, they decided not to bring him back for the second film. But in the first film, he was obviously playing himself as a young actor, But then in the future, he was also playing himself as his older version, and they used a mask that they used from his own face. They molded his face and put a mask over him to make him the older version of himself. And because they did that, they had already had that mold to hand for the second film, and they just put it on a second actor and made that actor act in a way with mannerisms and a voice similar to his. And he ended up taking a lawsuit against the production company, and he won because it was found that they used his image. And the fact here that Altman had tweeted out her and used a voice actor that was very similar to Scarlett Johansson, seems like she may have a case here. This is just another example of a misstep by Altman and OpenAI, in my opinion. But hey, this is a very long episode. Let's get into some scripts, tricks, and tips and take it home. First up, just to promote something of my own, this week I hosted a webinar for my employer, Numescent, who's also a show sponsor, and it was on how to make your Windows 11 migration your last true application migration. Thank you to everyone who attended, and thanks for the high level of engagement and the great questions. If you weren't able to get the actual live webinar, the recording is available, and I'll share a link with this episode, which is again episode 335, and you can get a on-demand version to watch for yourself. Next up, David O'Brien had a pretty interesting and topical tweet. He said, "Is single sign-on better or worse for security? One account, easier to protect. If it gets popped, massive blast radius." So that's SSO. Without many accounts, harder to protect, but a minimal blast radius. Now, he didn't draw a conclusion in that tweet, but it definitely is food for thought. Finally, Steve Hosking shared a tool developed by Microsoft for Windows Defender application control that essentially allows you to convert your existing AppLocker policies and convert them over to use in Windows Defender application control. So I wasn't aware that this script exists. I think it was actually published last year. So thank you, Steve, for sharing that, because this would be really useful to people. But that's it for this episode. Sorry it went so long. Hopefully next week's won't be as long. And actually, just a heads up, I'm going to be traveling from next week. So the audio may sound a little bit different while I'm traveling, but I am still committed to getting an episode out while abroad. As always, thank you so much for listening.